Hey, well, what's up, Colliders? Welcome back to the Collision. Daniel here, and Mr. Tom Cruise is once again trying to save cinema. The latest movie in the Mission Impossible series, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, just hit theaters. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. Tom Cruise is definitely one of the last kind of leading, kind of classic Hollywood leading men action stars that are still going strong today. But in many ways, he's even more than that. He's almost become like an embodiment of a movie making philosophy, kind of adopting this persona as like the hero of classic old school movie making and kind of more tactile, practical effects and entertainment, kind of against sort of the more modern trends of just sort of mind numbing CGI spectacle and stuff that's just come to define movies in recent years. And I would say Mission Impossible number 7 is, in a lot of ways, maybe his manifesto of that philosophy. There are definitely some issues and things, some nitpicks to have with this movie, but let's be honest. This movie is great. This movie definitely lives up to the hype. Just sort of endlessly entertaining, kind of all the elements that have that you would expect from like a modern Tom Cruise movie that is on its own a great movie. But even more than that, I think this is sort of a reminder of why we go to the movie, sort of that cinematic experience. So let's get into this. So maybe get the few negatives out of the way first, and then we can kind of gush about how awesome some of the later stuff in this movie is. And I think with a lot of Mission Impossible movies, the actual plot has never been overly consequential to the story. For the most part, it often sort of acts as like the thread to string together the crazy action stunts and set pieces. And that is very much true this time around. And even by sort of the standards of the franchise, the actual plot of this movie isn't always all that compelling. There's a lot of sort of spinning the wheels where characters are sort of globetrotting, going to these fun, exotic locations, but never actually like learning a whole lot more about like the mysteries or the plot or discovering or accomplishing anything. To where like by the very end of the movie, they really haven't gone much further than when they started the film. And kind of another element of the plot that I don't think will be controversial, but is definitely I think a bold swing, and that is the villain. Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise's character, as he's battled kind of global powers, he's battled sort of covert secret agencies, and this time he is battling, confronting technology itself. So kind of the villain of this Mission Impossible 7 isn't a person, it is an AI, kind of this algorithm that has become kind of sentient and kind of gone rogue, and kind of all the power, global powers now want to try and control it and kind of gain the power to unlock it. And it's definitely, obviously, with everything going on in our culture, it's a timely and kind of culturally relevant creative decision to shift it to sort of facing AI and technology. The problem is that it's not always the most interesting of a villain, and even with a lot of like although there are several like kind of long kind of expedition dumps to try and explain sort of what this is, it's never, even by the end of this movie, very clear exactly what the AI is, what it can do, what it can't do. At times, it almost has this like godlike kind of omnipresence to it can kind of do anything, but then at other times, it seems like almost kind of inexplicably inept and it can't do things that you feel like it should do. So definitely, I think the weakest part of this movie is, and maybe that's just personal taste for me, but just sort of the AI kind of faceless, disembodied villain. But hey, this is a Mission Impossible movie, so anytime as an audience member you start kind of scratching your head or thinking too hard at like a plot point that doesn't make sense, then Tom Cruise goes and jumps off a mountain on a motorcycle or something crazy like that. And obviously the plot in a movie matters, but I don't think anyone goes to the Mission Impossible movies for the plot. They go for the crazy action, they go for the stunts, they go to see what kind of bizarre, crazy, wild thing Tom Cruise manages to pull off. And I would say for this movie, my only criticism of the action, of the stunts, is just how much like the marketing campaign sort of spoiled some of the what happens, and kind of featured, kind of gave away a lot of the surprises that I think would be fun to have discovered in the movie itself. But even like knowing exactly what's coming and how a lot of that turns out, thanks to the marketing, the actual events totally deliver. This is uh, thrilling, especially like the last like third of this movie is just nonstop kind of edge of your seat, just brilliantly executed action scenes. And I don't think it's hyperbole to claim or to argue that this is some of the best action I think that has ever been put to film. And the action scenes in this, they're exhilarating, not just because of like the immersive, engaging spectacle of what's happening, but also because it just, as you would expect from a Tom Cruise movie, it all just feels so like tactile and real. Largely, I think because it was they did a lot of this practically, and even kind of more impressive in contrast to some like the other recent released action movies, like the Indiana Jones movie or the last Fast and Furious movie, which just looked very kind of glossy and CGI. This movie is definitely not that. Every scene of this thing, even though obviously there's probably technical CGI improvements and stuff, it feels real, and because of that, definitely even more of like an immersive experience. And I will say, kind of notably, speaking of the action, this is primarily an action movie. A lot of the like the more like clever espionage and stuff that from other entries in the series largely takes a back seat, which is somewhat unfortunate. Although when Tom Cruise is jumping off mountains on motorcycles, it's easy to forgive that aspect. Speaking of Tom Cruise, he's as great as ever. He's definitely a movie star. And even in this movie, he's able to show some more like emotional vulnerability with his character to kind of supplement the fact that he's like a superhero action star kind of character. A lot of his crew from previous movies, they return. Although probably the standout cast member in this is a newcomer, Haley Atwell. Makes her first appearance, and she's great. She is excellent. She seamlessly kind of fits in with the cast and what's going on. And she's able to kind of showcase her own like intelligence and capabilities like, as a character without ever feeling like she's sidelining or that like she has to be elevated. You know, Tom Cruise must, decrease so she can increase, like sort of the case in like the recent Indiana Jones movie. So she is definitely a great addition to the cast. As far as content to consider, kind of things going on the surface of this film, really not a whole lot. Language, there's one kind of hinted at F-bomb that thankfully gets interrupted by a swift Tom Cruise punch to the face before it is able to be fully articulated, so that isn't fully in there. There is kind of a handful of other kind of more minor profanities scattered throughout this movie, although not a whole lot. And then a god, the name God gets used kind of wrongly multiple times, sometimes combined with other profanities. But overall, not a whole lot of language in this. Violence, there is like a high body count. A lot of people die in this movie, although of like a pretty bloodless variety. Characters get shot or stabbed or thrown out of moving vehicles, but never in like a gory, bloody, kind of gratuitous way. So not a whole lot with violence. As far as sexuality, kind of the one area in this movie is that there is a scene that takes place at like this sort of party that's at almost like a nightclub sort of vibe location. And at this party, there are these dancers, both male and female, just sort of like writhing and dancing on these platforms. They are not actually nude, as far as I could tell, at least, although they are dressed with such like tight fitting and kind of outfits that they may as well be. There's about as close as you can get to that. And although they're that being said, they're only really seen kind of in the background or else in like silhouette form, which shows off the very like the bodily form, but you don't see like the details of it. And as far as I could tell too, like I know in one of the early trailers there's somewhat gratuitous shot of that scene and those characters, and I don't think that actual scene from the trailer made it into the movie, so I do think it has been toned down a bit from what that might lead you to imply. But really, outside of that kind of brief scene in the movie, nothing else as far as sexuality goes. As far as themes, kind of things going on beneath the surface of this, kind of the main one is this AI and kind of battling with technology. I do think, like I said, that making AI the villain of a Mission Impossible movie isn't necessarily the most compelling as far as like the action and some of the storyline, although it is an interesting inclusion just as far as like our cultural situation, because it does release, this movie is coming out at a time when there is a lot of anxiety and kind of concerns about the role of AI technology, and like even like the Hollywood writers are on strike because of a lot of concerns about AI, and so it definitely is sort of a culturally relevant thing. And the movie does kind of seem to suggest that like the biggest existential threat that we face today is not necessarily governments or these secret organizations, but just sort of our over reliance and like immersiveness of technology. Although that being said, the AI in this was in the movie they just simply call it the entity. It is left largely ambiguous. Like you don't really know a whole lot about what this AI is or what its goals are. And kind of as a result, kind of the more like physical villains in this film end up being people kind of are, the selfish, flawed people that want to wield and kind of use technology for evil means. And kind of as a result of that, like sort of the more like physical manifestation of like the villains in this end up being people, even more so than like the actual AI algorithm itself, as the movie sort of shows, kind of provides light cultural commentary just on, our the power that comes with technology and whether humans are can be trusted to wield such power. And again, the movie doesn't necessarily is more concerned with like stunts and action rather than like deep, nuanced commentary. But it does touch on a lot of the concerns and things that that we face today, and even like several characters kind of unpack and like verbalize, that the power of this technology is really that, like, I think as one character says, like you can redefine morality and you can redefine truth, and kind of by shaping the way people think, that's how you gain control of the world rather than just like might and armies. And so definitely some interesting stuff in kind of to unpack with that. And it is interesting, like the Mission Impossible movies are well known for like their fancy technological gadgets and all the little tools and stuff that they've used over over the years throughout the series. So it is an interesting sort of shift of that. Say, hey, what happens when like our technology goes from being like an advantage that we have to being like an obstacle, when we become over reliant on these tools and kind of need to go back to the basics of sort of this, humanity and who we are and kind of flesh and blood human thinking. So again, the movie doesn't necessarily provide a whole lot of like meaningful answers, at least not in part one of two, but it does raise some interesting questions. So in the end, this movie is great, even despite like a lengthy, like I think it's like a 2-hour, 45-minute runtime. And I am I'm on the front lines for pushing back against, hey, all movies should be under 2 hours. But this movie manages to keep kind of brisk momentum all throughout. Never a boring moment. Even when it ended, I was kind of looking at my watch to make sure that much time had passed. And even just the fact that this is part one of two kind of avoids just the unsatisfying feeling that sometimes comes with that. Like the Fast and Furious, Fast X, and even the Across the Spider-Verse movie that seemed like you got half of a story. So because it is so like entertaining, you just don't feel cheated like you just got part of a story, because that part is so fun, such a fun journey to go on. Dead Reckoning Part 1 is one of those rare movies that delivers exactly what it promises, which is this great kind of thrilling action and just a great time at the movie theater, which is, hey, that's what Tom Cruise wants, and he definitely delivered that to us. But hey, let me know what you think. Did you enjoy this movie as much as I did? Were you blown away by the action, some of the crazy stunts that happened, or were you let down by maybe like the less compelling plot or just sort of the technology? Would love to have a conversation with you in the comment section. And hey, if you haven't done so, I encourage you guys, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. I would love to have you join with what we're doing here. Got movie reviews and live streams and this other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through World for Christ.